Imagine walking into a bank to rob it, but instead of wearing a mask, you cover your face with lemon juice. Sounds absurd, right? Yet, that's exactly what MacArthur Wheeler did in 1995. He believed lemon juice would make him invisible to security cameras. When he was arrested, he was in shock. "But I used the juice," he kept repeating. What seemed like sheer madness had a simple explanation. He thought he knew something he actually didn't. This story would just be funny if it weren't also tragic. Wheeler's mistake wasn't a lack of knowledge, it was too much confidence. He truly believed he understood enough to act without questioning himself. And now, think about this. Aren't we all doing the same thing in different areas of life? How many of our own certainties are just illusions? The truth is, we all fall into this trap, and we don't even realize it. There's a psychological phenomenon that makes us feel smarter exactly when we're wrong. It affects everyone, from everyday people to world leaders. It's an invisible error that shapes our opinions, decisions, and even how we see reality. And maybe you've already fallen into it. But why does this happen? How can we be so sure about something and yet be so wrong? Science has an answer, and once you learn it, you may never see intelligence the same way again. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger set out to test something intriguing. Do people really know how much they know? To find out, they gave participants tests in logic, grammar, and humor. Afterward, they asked each person to estimate how well they had performed. That's when they discovered something surprising. The worst performers believed they had done exceptionally well. Meanwhile, those who had actually performed well underestimated their own abilities. This revealed a strange pattern. The less capable someone was, the more they overestimated their skills. On the other hand, people with higher competence tended to doubt themselves. This phenomenon became known as the Dunning-Kruger Effect, a cognitive bias that prevents us from accurately assessing our own abilities. In other words, the less we know, the more confident we become. The data confirms this illusion. A study from Cornell University showed that the bottom 25% of participants overestimated their skills by up to 50%. Another study found that 70% of people believe they are more intelligent than the average person, which is statistically impossible. The same happens with driving. 93% of American drivers believe they are above average. But if almost everyone thinks they're better than the rest, who are the bad drivers? This effect doesn't just apply to test scores or driving skills. It influences every aspect of life, from the workplace to social media. But why does this happen? Why does our brain make us believe we know more than we actually do? To understand that, we need to take a closer look at how our mind processes confidence and ignorance. Our brains love certainty. Having quick, solid answers gives us a sense of control. It makes us feel intelligent and secure. But confidence can be a problem when it's based on superficial knowledge. And most of the time, it is. Have you ever heard of the headline effect? It happens when someone reads just the title of a news article and instantly forms a strong opinion. No research, no context, just conviction. And the worst part, a University of Michigan study found that when people are confronted with facts that contradict their beliefs, they tend to double down instead of reconsidering. David Dunning put it simply, if you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. The problem isn't just not knowing something, it's not knowing that you don't know. And the less you know, the harder it is to see your own mistakes. This explains why some of the most confident people are often the least informed. Our brain doesn't search for truth, it searches for coherence. It wants things to make sense quickly, even if that means accepting wrong conclusions. But this effect doesn't just impact individuals, it shapes entire societies. And believe it or not, it's influencing the world far more than you might think. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just affect individuals, it shapes entire societies. We live in a world where the loudest voices aren't always the most informed, and that has serious consequences. Politics, science, economics, everywhere we look, we see people speaking with absolute certainty, even when they are completely wrong. The problem? Confidence is more convincing than accuracy, and when the truth is complex, simple, and incorrect, answers often win. History is full of examples. Dictators, incompetent leaders, and fraudulent gurus have all used overconfidence to manipulate crowds. But this isn't just something from the past. Today, the internet amplifies the Dunning-Kruger Effect like never before. We have access to more information than any other time in history, but instead of making us wiser, it often makes us more misled. A Stanford University study found that when people are exposed to information that contradicts their beliefs, they often react by clinging even harder to their original views. This creates echo chambers where entire groups reinforce each other's illusions. Even worse, social media algorithms don't promote accuracy, they promote engagement, and according to an MIT study, false information spreads 6 times faster than the truth. The result? A world where confidence outweighs knowledge and where incorrect beliefs become nearly impossible to correct. But if the most confident people are often wrong, what happens to those who actually do know what they're talking about? If the Dunning-Kruger effect makes the least prepared believe they are experts, the opposite also happens. Those who truly understand a subject tend to doubt their own knowledge. This creates a curious problem. The most confident voices aren't always the most correct ones. People with real expertise know how complex things really are. The more they learn, the more they realize how much they still don't know. This phenomenon is called imposter syndrome. And ironically, the smarter someone is, the more they tend to question themselves. Albert Einstein once said, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know." This is the paradox of knowledge. The truly informed hesitate, speak carefully, and weigh their words. Meanwhile, the uninformed speak with absolute certainty. The problem is that in public debates, confidence sounds more convincing than nuance. That means the most qualified voices are often ignored, while the loudest dominate the conversation. And here's another issue. Experts underestimate how much more they know compared to the average person. They assume what they say is obvious to everyone, which leads them to explain less or stay silent altogether. So if those who truly know speak less, while those who don't know speak more, who ends up shaping what society believes to be true? To answer that, we need to go back in time and see how philosophy warned us about this long ago. The idea that we know less than we think isn't new. For centuries, philosophers have warned us about the dangers of certainty. Socrates was one of the first to recognize this. He famously said, "I know that I know nothing." But this wasn't a statement of ignorance. It was an acknowledgement that true wisdom begins with realizing our own limitations. Centuries later, Immanuel Kant expanded on this idea. According to him, our minds act as filters, shaping the way we see reality. The problem? We mistake our perception of the world for absolute truth. In reality, we only see fragments of the whole. Then came Nietzsche, who took it even further. He argued that believing in absolute truths was not just wrong, it was dangerous. "Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies," he wrote. According to Nietzsche, we cling to certainties not because they are correct, but because they make us feel safe. If these philosophers were alive today, they would likely see the Dunning-Kruger effect as a modern version of what they had always warned about. The illusion that we know more than we really do. But if we can never fully trust our own knowledge, that raises an even deeper question. What's the point of seeking knowledge at all if we'll never truly grasp everything? If we can never have all the answers, what's the point of seeking knowledge? This question leads us straight to nihilism, the idea that if nothing can be known with absolute certainty, then everything is questionable. To some, this thought is discouraging. But does it have to be? Optimistic nihilism offers a different perspective. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a burden, we can see it as freedom. If we know that we'll never fully understand everything, then we don't need to cling to rigid truths. Instead, we can stay open to learning and evolving. Nietzsche believed that life has no inherent meaning. It's up to us to create our own. The same applies to knowledge. We don't need to know everything to make the pursuit of understanding worthwhile. In fact, accepting our limitations makes us better learners. So acknowledging our ignorance isn't a reason to give up. It's actually the greatest reason to keep exploring. But how do we avoid falling into the traps of the Dunning-Kruger effect in everyday life? Is there a practical way to develop intellectual humility? If the Dunning-Kruger effect is so common, how can we escape it? The answer isn't just knowing more, but questioning better. Here are a few strategies that can help us avoid this mental trap. 1. Develop metacognition. Think about your own thinking. Ask yourself, am I overestimating my knowledge? If you never question your certainty, you're probably too confident. 2. Challenge your certainties. Whenever you feel absolutely sure about something, try this test. Can you argue for the opposite side? If not, you may need to learn more before being so convinced. 3. Consume information with skepticism. Social media bombards us with oversimplified opinions. Instead of trusting the first thing that makes sense, seek multiple sources, check the facts, and stay critical. 4. Accept complexity. Reality is rarely black and white. If an explanation seems too simple, it's probably ignoring important details. 5. Practice reflective silence. Sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is listen instead of speaking. Intellectual humility isn't about never having an opinion. It's about knowing when it's worth sharing. And even with these strategies, the Dunning-Kruger effect never fully disappears. We're always caught between what we think we know and what we actually know. The key is to keep questioning. But in the end, what does this endless pursuit of knowledge really mean? The Dunning-Kruger effect teaches us a valuable lesson. Absolute certainty can be one of the biggest mistakes we make. True wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions. If there's one thing we can be sure of, it's that our understanding of the world will always be limited. There will always be things we don't know, and things we don't even know we don't know. But that shouldn't stop us. In fact, it should motivate us to keep learning, questioning, and expanding our perspectives. The greatest mistake isn't being wrong. It's refusing to consider that we might be. And if there's one thing that truly separates ignorance from wisdom, it's not how much someone knows. It's their willingness to change their mind. So next time you feel absolutely certain about something, stop for a moment and ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? That simple question can be the difference between falling into the Dunning-Kruger trap and actually growing as a thinker. And now I'll ask you, have you ever fallen into this trap, or do you still think you never have?